there's never been physical evidence of it. So when you
But there are rebuttals to that, right?
And what's the rebuttal?
Gary Nolan, Stanford PhD, tenured professor of, microbiology, up for Nobel, Nobel nominee every year, claims to have parts that this is at least like the sequence of events, right? Like a UFO is seen in like Ubatuba, Brazil. It like explodes. A piece of it is mailed to Jacques Vallée. Jacques Vallée gives it to Gary Nolan for mass spectrometry. And,
for sure.
Totally. Yeah.
But, it's interesting that a lot of this ufology that's happened has come back to religion. And I think the thing we get lost in all the time is that obviously since 2017, when Chris Mellon walked out of the Pentagon and put this on the front of the New York Times, it's suddenly become a big part of the accepted lexicon to where like fucking NBC talks about it.
Yeah.
Like that's strange.
Yeah.
But like we forget that these thoughts have always existed throughout human history. They've been something that, especially throughout the 20th century, were happening, and maybe it was just more taboo to talk about. But you're really good friends with a guy who's like maybe like the most respected name in the entire space, because he's just like a genius in life, and that's Jacques Vallée.
Yeah.
Like this isn't new to him. He's been on this shit for fucking 5-6 decades or whatever.
Yeah.
How did you even meet that guy?
I met him through bringing in people to the Peter's orbit or whatever, and then just getting interested in all these subjects kind of at the frontier of epistemology, and so UFOs is one of those topics. And I met him around the same time I met like Hal Puthoff and Gary Nolan, and I'd watched Close Encounters of the Third Kind and had known like he had, it was the French eccentric character that Francois Truffaut was based on and stuff.
Yeah.
But other than that, in his like kind of internet history, I didn't know much. And then I met him and I was like, this guy's really not only like incredibly knowledgeable and like, I don't know, it's when you speak to some of these people, it's almost like you're also pinging off their conviction, because he's like, it's so obvious to him that like, because when you first meet a guy like that, you're like, you just want to know if the thing's real. And he's gone to like hundreds of crash sites. There's no like question to him that like this stuff is real. And so I think, meeting somebody like that who's also rational, thoughtful, worked on the earliest version of the internet under Doug Engelbart at, Xerox PARC, and was an astronomer, has some physics background. And
he's a true polymath.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways.
Really smart guy, venture capitalist.
Yep.
You start to, think, okay, like, and then you read his books and they're like incredibly, like he can at times be a little long-winded and speak in these sort of like overly complex ways, but you read his books and they are incredibly well researched. Like they're just really, really good. He's fascinating. He's one of these people where like you spend time with him and there's some like osmosis like thing that goes on where I think he like, expands your consciousness just by like being with him. I was actually just with him like maybe a month and a half ago in Paris. And he has a spot there, and he was talking about cathedrals and how they're built, and he was talking about blue stained glass, and he just goes, he's so knowledgeable, and I cherish any time I get with that guy. He's amazing.
Yeah, he's definitely one of those guys when, not that I've been in a room with him, but like when you listen to him talk. So I guess when he walks in the room with you, you're like, ooh. This is a different level of human.
Yeah.
But like you talk about the whole crash retrieval thing and him going to these scenes. One of the skeptic arguments, which I welcome the skeptic arguments, and I try to be a skeptic myself too, because I think you really have to balance things out. But like, a guy like Michio Kaku, who I had in episode 145, do you believe in God?
Well, I believe in the God of Einstein. He believed in God, but not the God that intervenes in human affairs. It was the God of order, the God of simplicity and elegance. Einstein was asked the question, did the universe have a choice? Is it unique? So universes, you can create universes in an afternoon, but most of them are unstable. Most of them fall apart. Most of them don't work. Our universe is stable. It works. Everything fits together. And then the question is, what set off the bang? That's what we do for a living. We have the Big Bang Theory up to the point where the universe is going to explode. Why did it explode? We think it was a quantum event, and we are here because we are in the universe which decided to explode. So Einstein said, was it all an accident? And he thought, no, it could not have been an accident.
He's become very open to this stuff and looks at the science of it, which is very, very cool. But he also, when it comes to some of the crashes and things like that, he's like, why doesn't anyone, for the sake of God, steal a pen or steal a piece of metal or something like that? My God. There's never been physical evidence of it. So when you
But there are rebuttals to that, right?
And what's the rebuttal?
Gary Nolan, Stanford PhD, tenured professor of, microbiology, up for Nobel, Nobel nominee every year, claims to have parts that this is at least like the sequence of events, right? Like a UFO is seen in like Ubatuba, Brazil. It like explodes. A piece of it is mailed to Jacques Vallée. Jacques Vallée gives it to Gary Nolan for mass spectrometry. And, you have isotope ratios of heavy elements that do not exist on Earth and are completely anomalous in the context of asteroids from other planets. So I'm not saying that that's a smoking gun. They're small pieces.
Have you seen it?
I've seen them. You need more testing. But I will say that's like a good argument against the Kaku thing, where it's like that is a thing that like you, Michio Kaku, who's a brilliant string theorist, you should go check that out and like, falsify or corroborate, whatever, talk to Gary about that.
Why doesn't, but that's the thing. Why doesn't Gary like walk into Joe Rogan's studio and put it on the table?
I think he should. I showed the pieces in my episode with Gary, and I was like so fired up. That was like one of my first bigger episodes because I was like, this is going to be insane. Like people are going to freak out.
I've never seen your Gary Nolan one.
It's like way back. It's like, a couple years ago. But he should. I think he should go on Rogan.
Can we pull that up? Can we pull up Jesse's video with Gary Nolan? Do you remember the area where you showed the object?
Yeah, it's later in the episode.
All right.
And I will disclaim they're small, but if you just take what was observed, the fact that they were mailed to Jacques around that, and then you have mass spec being done with, elements with weird isotope ratios, I think that is worthy of further inquiry.
Oh,
like
sure.
That's I think a pretty big deal.
Now, for people out there who don't speak Japanese, can you explain isotope ratios and why this is important?
I guess like you have radioactive decay on any given element, and so an element will change, through, I think it's through the weak force, right? You have like, electron changes going on for any given element if it's unstable, and, it changes, isotopes. And, there are certain isotope ratios that are very common, and then you have other isotopes that, are very uncommon that you would, just not find in nature.
I think James, when he was doing Moment of Contact, talked about some of the isotope ratios, I believe. I hope I'm remembering this right. I want to say that was like an hour and 10 minutes into episode 139, but he was talking about like some of the isotope ratios that were recovered from the soil around there where that crash happened in 96 in Virginia. So it was a UFO crash site,
allegedly? It was
allegedly?
an alleged UFO crash.
Or a landing site where they had
crash.
Been. It was a crash.
Yeah, it was like an explosion and crash, yeah.
Okay, and so they were testing something with the isotopes and the whatever the fuck. But
yeah,
what did
Gary Nolan.
What did they find in there without, going like too complicated? Like what did they find to be able to say like, oh, this is not a part of our element table of elements?
Something to do with magnesium isotopes that were a certain ratio that was not found on Earth. If you could create it, it would be in the billions of dollars, and it was 1957. So,
and it's this is a common occurrence that points to not of this Earth. Now, if you pulled back in like perhaps the wavelength of like Diana Walsh Pasolka, there's an argument there that if it's like aliens and demons or angels and demons or whatever, it doesn't leave behind like a metallic physical thing. It's more at least behind a physical mark.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about having actual pieces of something, like I'll just call it metal for the sake of calling it metal, but it's not necessarily metal.
Yeah.
Like that to me, maybe I'm thinking about this way too naively, that points more towards, okay, this is another entity,
Yeah.
an alien, a future human, something like that. It's not.
Yeah.
This is not necessarily something that is biblical in the sense that it's an angel or it's a demon.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I guess we got the pieces up here.
Oh, we do. All right, let's take a look at this.
So this is magnesium bismuth, by the way.
Okay, you can point
Yeah.
that mic right at it and turn that speaker up, James. Thank you, brother. We got James filling in today.
Thank you,
Last
James.
minute. So shout out to you. I appreciate you being
Shout
here,
out,
brother.
James.
All right, let's hit play.
All of the anomalies about the pieces of magnesium coming from Ubatuba. But what about the other sample on the table? Those are pieces of bismuth. Nolan actually couldn't recall how it was procured, so we had to call Hal Putoff to get the full scoop. Hal.
Hi, Hal.
Dr. Hal Putoff has one
I
of the
love how
most
you can just
interesting
call him
careers
Hal
of
Putoff.
all time. He was first a laser physicist, and then out of Stanford Research Institute, he started the government's psychic spy program. Since then, he's been doing frontier tech research and has briefed multiple presidents on UFOs.
So do you know the original story of how it was kind of procured
The
initially?
original story was that it was sent anonymously by someone claiming to be an Army officer.
Long story short, this Army officer was going through his grandfather's archives when he found this rare sample.
And then written in the diary was that it was a piece from
Roswell.
Roswell.
True or not, these thin layers of bismuth magnesium are very hard to reproduce. Hal claims that they even have the properties to micro-size waveguides for terahertz frequencies.
It turns out that it reduces the size of the required microwave guide for terahertz frequencies down to about 1/30th of the wavelength, which is amazing. So it means you can basically put 30 waveguides in the volume of a single waveguide at terahertz frequencies.
Got it. Thanks a lot, Hal. Really appreciate it. What can you do with terahertz that we can't with?
All right, yeah, let's.
Well,
let's
it's just
pause it
more.
there. That's nuts.
Yeah. So you have little pieces. I mean, obviously they're visually anticlimactic, but if you look at the fact pattern, that's worthy of investigation. You have a guy of, Nolan's caliber looking into it.
Now, why doesn't Nolan let more of a skeptical guy just about that, maybe UFOs have been seen or crashed, like Brian Keating, come in there and test it? Because, like,
I think he should.
If I wanted to be a cynic, I could be like, he's sitting there with, some piece of metal going, man, bear pig.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Now, I don't, sounds like you've seen it and that's not what it is. But, like,
I
why
mean,
doesn't he do that?
I haven't personally done mass spec on, so I am
Right.
going on his word there, and I have to, full disclosure, like I don't know for sure that the isotope. I can't see the thing and be like the isotope ratios are,
Right.
strontium, whatever, So yeah, I think he should. I think we should just like investigate. We should fund it. We should investigate more of this, and it should flip either way. It should be, this is definitely not ours, or this is this crazy mind-blowing thing.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.